Hey everyone, Chris Sawyer is here, and the Varietal Show is back. The Terminim is in the house, or I'm actually in their house. So, welcome everyone to the show. This is my great friend, Donald Patz. Some of you might know him, just Patz. Why does that sound familiar?
No particular reason.
Patz and Hall. Oh, I've had that line before.
Me too.
That would be this man that was a co-founder of that amazing brand. He started that in the 80s, and you know, I could talk forever about Pinot Noir and Chardonnay with this man, but there's some other things that you don't know about him. And you know, after you sold the name, the brand.
Yes.
You didn't sell yourself, but you sold the brand. You kind of got to follow some of your passions, and that is a very cool thing.
It's a really cool thing. So
here we are tasting the Terminim, and this is a amazing Rhone blend of this one is all white grapes, and we'll go into this, but what got you so into the Rhone varieties in the first place?
I was afraid of Rhone varieties. I'd never done anything with Rhone varieties before, but what I found interesting was a proposal from a friend of mine. We were talking about Jack Edwards earlier.
Jack Edwards, great guy.
Jack is an importer of French wines, and we were on the phone. I was talking to him, and he said, by the way, I'm sitting here in Aspen, Colorado with François Villard at a bar, and he's talking about doing a California project again. And so that was in June of 2017, and I said, I don't know if I want to do that or not, but if he comes to California and we hang out, then you know, we'll find out if we like each other enough to actually want to work together. And so in 2017, we put our heads together and went to see our friend Stu Bewley up at Alder Springs Vineyard in Mendocino, and signed up for a little tiny bit of fruit from him to start our Terminim project, which was a white blend that we're going to talk about first, and then 100% Syrah.
Yeah. So one thing I want to say is François Villard is an amazing guy. I've gotten to know him through the years for like 25 years straight, more than that actually, at the Hospice de Rhone, which is happening in Paso Robles every other year. We've had some problems because of this COVID thing, we are doing it this year, and I'm super excited because both he and I are going, and we love to support it. But one of the great attractions of that event is François himself. He's such an amazing man. I mean, he's really one of the most gifted winemakers in the world. And a lot of people don't really think about the Rhone Valley, oh, gifted winemakers. They just think about, oh my gosh, this is so different than Bordeaux or Champagne and everything. Well, guess what? They're the coolest people in the face of the planet there. And, you know, and this man is one of them. And François, you know how much I think of you. But he's a dear friend of mine, good Facebook buddy of mine too. And we follow each other all the time. So when I found out that you were getting involved with him, I was ecstatic.
My stock went up. Right?
His stock was already up. I don't know about it. But the fact is that this man knows his grapes, and he knows the Rhone grape varieties better than anyone. Right?
Yeah, he's the reason that I felt comfortable about jumping into this. And trying. And when we went to Alder Springs at first, I'm thinking we're going to do Viognier and we're going to do Syrah. But François starts running up and down the Marsanne and Roussanne rows, and I'm like, oh my gosh, the last thing I want to do is try to sell a Marsanne Roussanne. That's like really in the outer limits of, but the wine has turned out to be beautiful. We don't make a lot of this wine. We're making about 300 cases a year. Yep. This 2018 is what we're tasting. Yeah. I've sold out of 2018 and 2019. I have a little bit of this here at the winery that we can taste, but it's going very well.
Yeah, interestingly enough, it's 54% Marsanne, 22% Roussanne, 12% Viognier, and 12% Pic Poul Blanc, which I love. But but let me just say this: these are all varieties that you can use in the Rhone variety or in the Rhone region of France, which is just below Burgundy. It's actually where the Rhone River comes out of the Alps and cuts completely due south to Marseille. you know, this Stu is crazy for planting these grapes in the middle of nowhere. He says Mendocino County, but this is like crazy land.
This is not Anderson Valley,
No.
for example, which has become quite a popular, particularly for Pinot Noir.
Absolutely.
This is north of that, near a little town called Laytonville, and he's up on the side of this mountain. If you happen to be driving on Highway 101 near Laytonville, going north, just before you get there, if you look to the west, you'll see the vineyard on the side of the mountain in the distance. Yeah. It's spectacular, and Stu has been great in working with us, and he does this with all of his clients, but I think especially with the fact that François Villard is involved, he's excited about helping us to figure out what parts of his vineyard are going to work best for the style. Yeah. And what I was thinking of when we were making this was I wanted a wine. My wife is Korean, and we eat a lot of Korean type food, including fairly fishy tasting fish. And I wanted a white wine that would sort of slice through that and be really a great match for those kinds of fish. Anyway, that's the reason Peak Pool is in here. Yeah. Is Marsanne and Roussanne together can be very thick and oily at times, but Peak Pool has acidity. That's pretty much all it's known for. Yeah. And it will bring together the characteristics of both Marsanne and Roussanne, but give it this bite of acidity that's really exciting and refreshing.
Yeah, and what I associate Pic Pool Blanc with is actually the French Riviera. I mean, it's kind of what people drink there on the beaches. They have a great time. High acid, bright fruit flavors, and also goes so well with seafood. I mean, there's no doubt. When we get into Marseille and these kinds of fish stews and stuff, then we start talking about Marsanne and Roussanne. And Viognier is the aromatic part of it, where it's a tricky grape, actually. I mean, people go, "Oh, I like Viognier. It's cool. It smells good." Well, it's probably one of the biggest struggle grapes that you'll ever find, because if you don't pick it on the right day, you're screwed, because it'll get too sweet. It'll taste like you just over ripened everything, just because you missed it by a half a day. That's how big of that's how small of a border it's got. So I think that this combination is a brilliant combination, because you've got all these parts at work in here, and it's not only delicious as it is, but it's also amazingly, it can do all these kinds of pairings with different types of food.
Yes.
And fish is hard, you guys. It's not the easiest thing to pair with, but this is such a French style of wine. It seems like it's almost made in France, but it's not. It's made with the great fruit from Alder Springs up in Mendocino County.
He's just been great for us, and the Marsanne that he has there is really special. The Roussanne, he doesn't have a lot of it, but it's special too. And the addition of these other two grape varieties. In 2017, when we made the very first Terminim White, it was 2/3 Marsanne, 1/3 Roussanne. Really turned out well, but it occurred to me, and I really suggested that maybe we could get something a little more acidic that'd be part of the blend to help bring these richer textures together. It's been a delight to do. Also, very little new barrels, mostly used oak.
Yeah. So. It's just the balance in this is just genius. I mean, having been at Hospice de Rhone for so many years, I mean, you taste these wines that are magic inside the mouth, and this is one of them. I mean, this is a great example from America that matches up with really the finest whites of the Rhone Valley. So I think you did a great job. I mean, just overall. I mean, not just you, but Francois.
I want to make sure that people understand that, this isn't just Francois phoning it in. Yeah. Although during harvest he's in France, obviously, and I send text messages and pictures and chemistry back and forth, and we talk about strategies year round. He comes to California, but he was just here a couple of weeks ago. Yeah. We tasted through in this room, as a matter of fact, we tasted through all the wines together.
Jack just had him in New York.
That's right.
He was eating and drinking at some fine restaurants. Good job, Jack. So speaking of a grape that the Rhone Valley is very well known for, Syrah. Syrah, originally from Persia, has one of the greatest histories of the world, and really can create flavors that are so different. I mean, if you're a total nerd in the wine industry, you love Syrah. you just do, because it just has this thing about it that's so different than Cab or Pinot or Zinfandel or anything else that is in existence. It is, it's blended with Grenache. We hear about the GSM all the time, the Grenache, Mourvedre, Syrah, which are very, very common grapes there. But the real history of this grape in the Rhone Valley has to be gone up to the top in the northern part, where this is bottled by itself and sometimes mixed in with a little bit of, or co-fermented with Viognier. Just a teeny bit of Viognier, which is a white grape. But here we go into this version. You've got Francois with you.
Yes.
You've got an amazing site there. Tell everyone just, if we compared Russian River, where we're sitting right now, to that site, what's the difference?
Well, we're at elevation at Alder Springs.
Yeah.
It starts at 2,000 feet and goes up to 3,000 feet. So the white, for example, comes from some of the very highest parts of Alder Springs. And we started off with 2 different blocks of Syrah at Alder Springs. One at Spirit Rock portion of the vineyard and one at Cotto Ridge part of the vineyard. And eventually, this is the 2017, by the way. By the time we get to 2021, we're getting all of our stuff from Spirit Rock. It's a really interesting vineyard because Stu has so many different grape varieties blended there. It's just mind-boggling. But I personally believe that it's a fantastic site for Chardonnay, but it's a great site for these white varieties. And in terms of red wines from Alder Springs, my personal opinion is the best of the best is Syrah.
Yeah, you'll find other people that do vineyard designates from there of Syrah. It's a site that really elevation doesn't matter, and also it's pretty stony soils. It's uplifted, and it's just very interesting there. I mean, it's a destination no one ever goes to except for people that buy fine grapes.
One of the challenges for him to keep people buying his grapes is that it's a hike to get there. Mm-hmm. And as winemakers, we always want to spend as much time in the vineyard as possible. When you have to dedicate a whole day to just one vineyard, it becomes problematic for some people over time. I think we're committed to Alder Springs for Terminim for the time that we do this, and hopefully it goes on for a very long time.
Yeah.
But it's been great, and I have no problem taking a day to go see. In fact, we have a regular system now. When I go, I bring a whole bunch of stuff for lunch. We walk the vineyard for an hour or so with Stu, go back to his house there, lay out the lunch, drink too much Terminim, and then
I bet you a few other people probably do that to Stu too. He probably lives pretty well.
I'm telling you, you other wineries, you aren't doing this. At least Stu says you aren't. You should do it. It's really fun. Stu's a great guy to share lunch with. Well, and
he's a complete complete professional with a kind of a rustic edge, up there in the middle of nowhere. But the draw is all there because the quality of the grapes is as good as you get. So to me, I mean, this density of this flavor is so wonderful. I mean, it's lively, it's rich, but it's also got that amazing characteristic of Syrah, which is that kind of dark fruit, kind of character with a lot of, there's a plummy kind of thing to it. There's a lot of this wild berry kind of component. There's a concentration in there that's so great, but it also has a kind of a wild side to it.
I think you're right. And one of the things, you mentioned it, I mean, other people have been making Syrah from Alder Springs. You can go back probably 15 or maybe even 20 years of Syrahs that have been made from that. And Francois and I, in our early time together, were trying some of these older wines, and the style has changed a lot in California. But some of them were super high alcohol, really big extracted wines. And Francois was like, I don't want to make those. And I said, I don't want to make those either. But what do we want to make? That's maybe more important than what we do not want to make. Yeah. And so he was very concerned about tannins and the tannin structure of the wine. He wanted it to have, full tannins, but creamy, and make sure that you didn't peel into bitter, harsh tannins. And that can happen, especially with really ripe Syrah grapes. So he said, listen, I want you to taste the wines twice a day during fermentation. And I'm thinking, no, it's 40 minutes each way to the winery, and I'm not going to do that twice a day for. But anyway, I'm listening to you, Francois. So what do you want me to do? And he said, if it starts to taste too tannic, I want you to stop pumping over and go bucket by bucket over the top. So I said, well, if we're eventually going to be bucket by bucket, let's just do bucket by bucket. And this 2017 and the 2018 both were,
how cool is that?
100%. Pull out 5 gallons at the bottom, hand it to a guy on top who sprinkles it over the cap. And I think the end resulting wine is really elegant because of that. Yeah. There's an elegance that's not usual for Syrah. Now look, if you dig the really big, extracted, monstrous ones, go for that. I'm a real believer you should drink the wines you like. This is the Syrah I like. And
this
so
is the
I'm
Syrah
happy to be able to share.
It has a nice balance between a hot climate Syrah and a cool climate Syrah because it is very aromatic. That's one thing. I mean, it attracts you right in. You want to dive inside this glass just because the violets, the lavender, there's kind of a wild herb thing going on in there. But there's this dark kind of berry flavor with a lot of licorice kinds of notes and blue fruits. And I mean, the blueberry is a classic thing that you find in kind of more of a cool climate Syrah, and that's why I think it's got both. But the most important thing is it's not gamey, doesn't smell like you just like slapped a steak down on the grill and then you smelled your fingers, because it's not like that. And that's what hot climate Syrahs can smell like.
They really smell like your fingers.
Well, it's a steak smell. But you know, just because it smells so good, you want to eat it right then, but you can't because you got to cook it first. But you know, it's one of those things where you really get into it, and it's seductive right off the bat. I mean, I want to be completely clear with you. It's got a fig, it's like got a black fig kind of thing going on. It's like a fig preserve, and I'm like, oh, you know, but it's so sassy, you know?
Yes, I agree with everything you just said. I really I've always liked Syrah, going back to when I was first getting interested in wine, and not in the wine business, just a guy buying wine to bring home. Syrah was a great variety that I was very intrigued by, but didn't really have a chance to do with Patz and Hall. So it was exciting to be able to start a new project and to bring on somebody who is really gifted at it, has done it for 20 years, to sort of be a stabilizer. So I didn't go off the deep end. And several times it was more on the white than on the red. He would say, "It's going to be okay, Donald. Just hang in there. It's going to finish fermentation. Yes,
Francois is so cool, you guys. I can't even tell you. He can handle Donald. That's a lot. I mean, that's saying a lot. I mean, the fact is that
I'm on my own, though.
I know, but the thing is, I'll give Hospice de Rhone a lot of credit down in Paso Robles. When we see Francois there, and these amazing winemakers from the Rhone Valley, they all check their egos in at the door. They never really have the egos. It's kind of the American ones that kind of have the egos that think they're so great. But the fact is, anyone that hangs out with these people goes, "Wow, this is what I want to be like." And he's really one of my superheroes, is Francois. So
I think what you're talking about is really interesting, because I've done a couple of different Pinot Noir groups. I'm not going to point fingers, but there's a sense that the French winemakers that go to those want to be distanced from everyone else. They're not really interested in what's going on in Oregon for Pinot. They're not really interested in what's going on in New Zealand or in Russian River. They just want to come, show how brilliant their wines are, and then leave. And at Hospice de Rhone, the thing I was really have been taken aback by was how interested the French winemakers are in what is going on in the U.S.
Yeah.
And how encouraging. They taste, I'm sure that Francois and Yves Couleron and Yves Gangaloff taste most of the wines that are there of that weekend, and are so encouraging and so supportive of what's going on with other people's wines. And when you visit them in France, if you are lucky enough to be able to do that, they are equally gracious and they're just really, really fun, interesting, and cool people. So I'm really honored to be able to work with Francois.
Yeah, I mean, this is just great stuff. I mean, it's cheers to Francois. And
Cheers to Francois.
I can't wait to see him in just a few weeks. You know,
Weeks.
you and I, and Francois and Jack and everyone. But this is just, if you really want to taste a true style of, like, kind of an impression of the Rhone that's made here in America, these two wines are amazing. That's just that's what I gotta say. I mean, that's one of the reasons I told him to pull these two out. They're awesome. And I really, I want to thank you for doing that. And thank you for buying into Francois, because the man is amazing. Dude.
He has been, yes.
Yeah. So, speaking of which, now we got to talk a little bit about California for just a moment here before we check out, and just drink the rest of these wines. But you were Pinot Chardonnay based at Patz and Hall, but you also had a lot of ties in Napa Valley, and this little grape called Cabernet Sauvignon.
Yeah, I've never heard of that.
Was an impression. You kind of like that too.
That's no. I started working in the Napa Valley. I started working for Flora Springs, and I worked with Gerard Winery, and I've done some consulting for a couple of other wineries as well in the Napa Valley. And so a big part of my experience also includes Cabernet, and this is the culmination of that. On the flip side, so this is Secret Door, Napa Valley Cabernet, and the JML is my secondary label for Secret Door.
Love it. Well, let's taste these two. I thought this was really cool that you pulled out two of them. So this is the JML is your lovely wife right there.
Yeah.
And I've met her, and one of the great things about Donald and I is we are our birthdays are one day apart. So when we drink together for our birthdays, we drink well.
So I'm pretty sure I'm one day older than you.
You are technically, yes. Technically. We won't go into the years when we were born.
Yeah,
but
that's,
yes.
that's not necessary.
No. But the Secret Door is the one that I came in contact with originally, and we're going to taste that in a minute. But the JML is the one that, is right out right now. It's 2018. This is the Secret Door, and this is really fun. Tell us a little bit about where the fruit came from.
Well, 2018, we're transitioning at this point. So I'm down to the last few cases of 2018, transitioning to 2019. And the blend will be different each vintage. There is no 2020 vintage for sort of obvious reasons if you know anything about what happened during 2020 with the smoke and particular fires. But in 2018, I had actually bought grapes from three different vineyards. And I was thinking about doing them as separate single vineyard designates for Secret Door. And as I tasted through one of those that was from a vineyard up on Atlas Peak, I realized maybe I didn't really want to bottle this as a single vineyard. It was good, but it wasn't really what I was looking for. And the other two wines I was making were really so much in line with my image of what I was trying to accomplish that I did not want to produce one that was less than that. So I said, what am I going to do with this? And it occurred to me that if I put a blend together of the three, using all of the Atlas Peak fruit, and created a secondary label, it would be a lot of fun. And so I chose those barrels early, and we bottled this wine about 6 months earlier than we would have if it was going to become one of my single vineyard designates. And the end result is, I think, a really fun wine to drink now.
I love it. Really pretty on the nose, just dark fruits, and I mean, it's almost like we just went down to the creek and we picked those blackberries and squished them in our mouth. And, there's also a nice, there's a classic plum, kind of an underlying dark plum kind of thing with almost, but the tannins are balanced. I mean, this is the most important thing about this Cabernet is, you don't have to chew through this. This is wine, you guys. Chewing through wine is not good. It's not, you shouldn't be doing that. That's a struggle. It's not a pleasure. And I think that this balance on this is just completely brilliant. I think there's a little bit of there's a little cassis kind of underlying tone that's going through the back end of that.
I think a lot of Americans don't understand the phrase cassis. So it's actually fairly herbal flavor.
Yeah.
And I think that
It's also blue, which
it
is
is,
interesting.
but in a lot of California winemakers, and justifiably so, because they've seen it, the reaction to fairly herbaceous flavored Cabernets are afraid of that characteristic for Cabernet. But it is essential. It is sort of like
It's what Bordeaux talks about all the time.
they do. But I don't think most Americans understand what that means. But I'm not afraid to have Cabernet that has a certain element of herbaceousness to it, and it shouldn't be the feature. You shouldn't be smelling like vegetables. That's not what I'm shooting for. Or like bell peppers or things like that. Those are not.
Those are the bad test dummies that we worked with back in the 80s when they were growing Cabernet and Pinot next to each other. They were growing Cabernet in areas where it was like way too cool to ripen.
But I think I think a certain amount of herbal notes, and I always think of it as bouquet garni, that sort of combination of dried herbs and flowers that is used a lot in soups, and especially in the south of France. If you get a hint of bouquet garni or some kind of like bay leaf or something like that, it's really lovely. And it says Cabernet Sauvignon. These are 100% Cabernet Sauvignon.
Yeah.
So I'm not blending Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Malbec, Petit Verdot, or anything else.
It's just the true grape by itself. I mean, and that's why it's a fantastic wine. As it opens up, I've tasted these wines through the years, and this new one I got a chance to taste recently. And to be really honest, you taste it that day, it's amazing. Then that half bottle's left open for the next day, and it's like, whoa, amazing experience.
They get better and better.
Yeah, they just get better and better. That's what a fine Cabernet really does. And if it's like one-dimensional at the beginning, it's probably not going to be that great in the next day. This had a lot of stuff going on the first day, and just showed its true colors the next day. That's what a fine Cabernet is. I think you've done a really good job with it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think this wine does really well after a decant as well. So if you have it tonight, I would splash decant it and give it a half an hour or so before.
Yeah.
Just because it's probably going to show a little bit better in terms of the aromas, but I almost never do that at home. I always just pop and pour, but I can see where it would advance this wine a little bit.
Speaking of pop and pour, here we go right into library care selection. Not necessarily, it's not that old, but it is the 2017, and this was from a special vineyard that you and I tasted this a long time ago.
We did.
I think it was for our birthdays.
It was.
And when I first tasted this with you, 2017. Really important thing here is this was picked way before the fire started. Remember, the fire started in October. Mid-October, and this was picked in September. This fruit is really good. I mean, we just had a little sniff of it before we started the show today, but I mean, oh my God, what's going on in this class?
I think it's really, you hit upon it, Chris, and that's the idea that, or at least the acknowledgement that there were potential problems in 2017 from the fires and the smoke that was being generated by them. But these grapes were not only picked, but they were picked, fermented, pressed, and in barrel before the fire started. So it had no opportunity for impact. This is a great vineyard site called Hirondelle. It's right at the base of the actual rock outcropping. And if you like social media and you check out the pictures that I put up under Secret Door on Instagram, you'll see pictures of the rock outcropping fairly frequently. It's a beautiful spot. I've loved working with it, and I'm really proud of the way that this turned out. This was my first shot at doing a Cabernet on my own. But as I mentioned, I'd worked at Flora Springs and Gerard Winery, so that Cabernet wasn't a complete mystery to me.
I love the Garveys. That's you talk about a farming family, like Pat Garvey and his family.
There you go.
As good as you get. I used to work with Pat Garvey for Flora Springs, so we in 1998, I was wasn't an intern, I had a job, but I was working with the Napa Valley wine grape growers.
Yeah.
Doug Stanton and Pat Garvey were on that with me, and we became good buddies way back, 25 years ago, pretty much. So I have nothing but the greatest respect for Doug Stanton and Pat Garvey.
Yeah.
They're great farmers. But, you really captured this appellation too, because it is a rocky surface there. It is crazy. If you guys know where Stag's Leap is the district, so there's two roads really of Napa. I mean, one's 29 and it's on the west side of the valley, and one's Silverado Trail, and it's on the right side of the valley, which is at the base of the Vaca Mountains on the east side. It's very easy to identify Stag's Leap district because of the coarse rocks that stick up on that mountain. They're crazy. They look like they're dangerous.
They probably are.
They probably are. And the whole thing is about the stag that jump from one ledge to the other.
Right.
Folklore, I don't know, but it's got a great name. But the fact is, the fruit from there is very distinctive.
It is, and I really wanted to use Stag's Leap because, and other people have heard me tell this story, but when I was dating the woman who is now my wife, she was living in Virginia. And I was trying to convince her to move to California to be with me, and her response was, I don't really like Pinot Noir that much anyway. I'd rather drink Bordeaux or Napa Valley Cabernet. So I said, fine, if you move to California to be with me, I'll make Cabernet Sauvignon for you someday. So in 2017, when I was released to be able to do whatever I wanted to do, Cabernet is high on the list of things I had to do. It turns out, though, there's an addition to this story.
Yeah.
So I'd heard this, and I was telling this story in front of my wife about 2 months ago, and she said, I'd like to add something. And I said, go ahead. And she said, I wasn't really saying I didn't like Pinot. What I was really thinking was, if you didn't sell Cabernet Sauvignon, you couldn't afford me.
Ooh. Yeah.
So anyway, I put her picture on the label.
Yeah, she deserves it. She's a wonderful woman. I've gotten to hang out with her too.
Oh, she's fantastic.
But the thing is that you really captured all of it in here.
Thank you.
It's a wine with personality. It's a wine that it's big. It's not a weak wine, but it's also pretty. It's got elegance to it. It's got class to it. It's not just about those dangerous rocks. It's about a style that you've set here that actually I see in both of them. It's a very elegant, sophisticated style of Cabernet Sauvignon versus being too bold, too overwhelming. It's just too much work. I think these are very balanced wines.
I think this is hearkening back to my, those early days that I was interested in wine, and I was drinking wines from the 70s when I first got interested in wine. And you can't recreate those. There's a bunch of reasons you cannot, one of which is, at the very least, there's totally different rootstock, totally different grape growing style. The way that we work in the vineyards is so different that it's impossible to grow the grapes the same way, let alone try to make the wines the same way. But I wanted the flavors and the aromas to hark back to that time. And I think of this sort of neoclassic Cabernet from the Napa Valley. These wines, I was tasting the 2017 on a barrel in early 2018, and it dawned on me, not that I'm that old, but these wines are going to outlive me. If they're properly stored, they'll go 40 years. They are going to be amazing wines for a very long time. And
I agree.
Right now, I don't mind drinking it.
So
we're in a win-win situation.
I know. This is my kind of lamb T-bone, like that. I love lamb so much.